Hey howdy hey y'all, Coffee Lux here and welcome to my channel. I wanted to do a festive video in celebration of all things October and autumnal, so I thought what better way to do that than talk about some witch lore. As some of you may know, I have an art doll business where I make Scandinavian and Germanic kitchen witch dolls. I've made and sold many dolls since beginning this business in January of 2022. And a lot of my studio vlogs are peeks into my making process for my dolls. I craft them by hand, and of course a little magic is imbued into each of them. The inspiration for this art doll venture of mine is this gal right here, and her name is Elvira. She's a traditional witch that was made in probably the 70s, maybe early 80s, but she looks to be 70s based on the research that I've done. Now, Elvira was a gift to my grandmother in the early 80s. A friend of hers had traveled to Scandinavia on vacation and found one of these dolls. And because my grandmother had dressed up as a witch for Halloween one year during the Elvira craze, this friend thought that it would be an excellent gift for my grandmother and brought it home for her. And my grandmother named it Elvira immediately. And so my grandmother passed this witch down to my mother, who passed it down to me. So it's been in 3 generations of our family's kitchens. It's been with me in all of my kitchens through all of my moves in Ohio and all the way here to Quebec. So she's traveled several countries now, actually, considering she came from Scandinavia. So yeah, it's her 3rd generation of service to my family. And from what I can tell, this like generational passing is actually quite common in the world of the kitchen witch doll. So let's talk about history. When you research these kitchen witch dolls and try to find information regarding them, honestly, not a lot can be found. It's kind of a mystery, and that is one of the things that makes these dolls so cool and their tradition so neat. You see a lot of stuff like, oh, my grandmother had one of these when I was a kid, and I know this tradition. And these are actually the primary responses that I get when people see my dolls for the first time, be it online or in person at our markets. People will come up to my booth and say, oh my goodness, my grandmother had one of these, I have to get one. And I just think that that's really neat. It's really neat. So it's a very nostalgic thing, even for people who don't necessarily have Scandinavian or German roots. So people will buy them for their grandmother who maybe lost hers along the way somewhere, or they'll buy them, for themselves to have in their kitchens. They seem to like collectively be reminders of our nanas, evoking the smell of fresh baked bread, the wafts of their simmering stews. Mine definitely makes me think of my grandmother and her making the best pies. I think of pies every time I see Elvira. So yeah, memory is a powerful thing, and these witches seem to have unlimited memory unlocking power. So that leaves the question, where did they come from? I speculate the phenomenon of the kitchen witch was like most folklore of oral tradition, and it was likely lost a bit to time, and there are not very many good records of them. While kitchen witches received a sort of like Renaissance period in America in like the 1970s, 1980s, their timeline of origin and like spread is actually kind of foggy. There are like tales and references of the dolls going back centuries, like hundreds and hundreds of years, but we don't know exactly where they started. There's uncertainty of where the tradition even began, because the earliest kitchen witch dolls, the evidence is split between Germany and Scandinavia both. So as much as we can pinpoint, we're still broadly in Western and Northern European countries for origins. And that's as much as we know. And of course, a question that I get asked all the time about these dolls is, what do they do? The lore of the Kitchen Witch is summed up mostly as a protection charm and a charm of productivity in the kitchen and safety, or the hearth of the home, wherever you consider like your heart center, which is typically historically the kitchen. The witch is said to bring good luck and expel ill will, so nobody's coming into your house with bad vibes, as well as keep you safe in your cooking endeavors. And so, according to folklore, kitchen witches help perform various tasks around the kitchen, like preventing foods from burning and milk from souring, and pots from boiling over, sauces from spilling, and they do things like help cakes and breads rise and make sure that you have the ideal mixing of like spices in your food. Essentially, a tiny helper of cooks of all walks of life. So with special magic like this, it's not hard to see why these dolls experience so much popularity in homes, both ancient and modern. They have a striking design quality, as you can see, with their charismatic witchy noses and tiny brooms, colorful clothing. Yeah, they're just like iconic. And so that is pretty much what we know about the lore. It's not that much, unfortunately. I wish that I could go deeper into this, but there's just not that much information to be found. And, you know, like I said, this is one of those things where so many people know about it, but nobody knows really where it came from. And that is the crux of so many oral traditions, really. So there are actually very few artists and doll makers who are pursuing the art of the kitchen witch these days, and that is one of the primary reasons why I've invested myself in carrying on this tradition. It's special to me, and it's special to those who grew up with these magical little hags in our homes. There's nothing more joy-inducing than folks lighting up when they see my work, because it unlocks some forgotten memory of childhood and heritage. So when it comes to my dolls, I have been working to make this folkloric art more inclusive and special, making an array of skin tones and lines so that everyone can feel included and represented in the magic of the Kitchen Witch. Here are, I'll show you some better footage later, but these little gals. These are some of my most popular models. And to chat about my dolls a little bit, I thought I would tell you a little bit about how they're made, what types of things that I use materials-wise, my processes for making these dolls by hand. This is my Vera model. She's very, very popular, one of the most popular dolls that I've made. I think she sells out anytime I list her or take her to market. She's very, very popular. Rarely have any of these left ever. But to make all of these dolls, I do sculpting for the face and hands. I sculpt the masters for these, and then I make silicone molds and then resin cast. So this is actually a hard resin, so you can drop her, she won't break. And then I dye paint these, and I'll show some closer up footage too. That way you can really see the detail in them and what they look like. The tags are custom made. I made the design myself and have a company out of Pennsylvania, I think it's Pennsylvania, print these for me, and they're just standard cotton tags, very, very simple. All of the fabric that is used to make these dolls actually comes from scrap bins at the fabric store. So all of the remnants from bolts that just are awkward lengths, maybe there's just a little bit of fabric, it's just not enough to like make a big project from, I go to the fabric store and I search through all of those bins and find fabrics that would suit my dolls. And I also get fabrics from the thrift store. There are some dolls that I've made that are almost fully thrifted fabric. I do all of my armature making as well, and so I use this aluminum, I'm not sure what gauge this is, it might be 16 gauge, aluminum wire to make all of their bodies. And one of my favorite parts on these dolls too is the little, I give them all these tiny little felt boots, which I hand sew. You know, there's such tiny little pieces that they're hard to use a sewing machine on, so that's one of the facets of the dolls that I hand sew. There's certain other elements on these that I'll hand sew as well, but for the most part I do like to use my machine for the bulk of just like the standard stitching. And then for the brooms, I do get these online. I've tried to make them myself, but it's really hard for me to find whatever this like material is. I have no idea what it's called. It's just like little sticks, but I am really struggling to find it because these would be fairly easy to make myself and I would prefer to do so, but I've been struggling to find a specific material that works well for this. So I use craft stores for my brooms, and that does the trick for the time being. This is Beatrix, and she is a good example of a different skin tone that I do offer. She is the darkest skin tone that I have made so far, and I absolutely love her. She's so sweet. She's just got such a wonderful look to her. I do all skin tones in between. I am not sure how much darker I can go with this with my current resin dyes, because if you mix too much resin dye and dilute the resin a little too much, it can cause it to not cure properly, which means the resin will be soft. And so this is as far as I could go with the dyes that I have so that it would cure correctly and be rock hard. This is Elfie, and Elfie is your classic green witch, and I absolutely adore her. She is also really popular. Anytime I make these, they typically sell out. They are also the only doll currently that I make these little felt witch hats for, and these are entirely hand sewn just because tiny felt, it's easier to hand sew. Yeah, and so she's a pretty popular choice, especially around this time of year. And this is my original model, and this is the one that I kind of made after Elvira. She's the closest in look and vibe, and her name is Agatha. And she is also one of my best sellers. She does tend to sell out pretty quickly. And so she is just kind of your classic quintessential kitchen witch. I am doing 2 art markets in December, the first week of December here in Montreal and Just Off Island. I am going to be doing a very special edition Yule Witch specifically for these markets, and they will only be available at these markets. And I am expecting them to sell out pretty quickly, so I will hopefully have more to show you about that soon, but it's going to be a collaboration with my friend, My Stitch Witch, who does embroidery, and she's absolutely incredible, and she is going to embroider little details on the skirts of these dolls, so they're going to be really special. So if you'd like to look at more of my work, you can head on over to my Instagram, Bobble and Hag, and peruse all of my photographs and my different kinds of dolls there. Thanks for sticking around with me and chatting about kitchen witches. It's really wonderful to share my art with people who are interested and enjoy talking about folklore, which is one of my personal favorite things. If you have any questions about anything, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And also comment if you or your nana or somebody else in your family had one of these witches when you were growing up. I would love to hear your story. Thanks for joining me, friends. Stay spooky. Bye! And real quick, before I end this video, I just wanted to show you this cute, tiny little cauldron that I got. I was in Ottawa a couple weeks ago for a little vacation, and I stopped by this witch shop called Witch Chest, and everybody there was so sweet and it was really great, and I found this perfect little guy to put on my market booth table, and I'm really excited about it.